Good afternoon. We have a hybrid procedure this afternoon. This afternoon's proceedings, although not I anticipate what takes place in the rest of the week, is going to be live streamed. Those with recording devices may report what they hear in the hearing room to the outside world, but only after a 10-minute delay has elapsed. The proceedings are still subject to a reporting restriction order, and it is possible that something will be said which inadvertently infringes that order. The order still applies, so that if proceedings are stopped for that or any other reason, reporting must stop as well. Devices may not be used to record or photograph. Yes.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, sir. Could you tell us your full name, please?
Robert Lambert.
You've provided a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 9th of May 2022. Are the contents of that witness statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to start, please, with your service in C Squad of Special Branch immediately before you joined the SDS. You told Operation Hearn that you had some knowledge of the SDS through that service. Did you know that Roger Pearce was being deployed, amongst other things, into the 121 bookshop, Railton Road, Brixton?
No, I didn't know that at the time that I was working on C Squad.
Was reporting from the SDS about the 121 Railton Road bookshop crossing your desk?
I can't immediately recall. It's certainly possible, but at that time I wouldn't have had knowledge where the intelligence had come from.
Did you know that the Revolutionary Communist Party had been infiltrated by the SDS?
Not at that time.
Did you know that the Revolutionary Communist Group had been infiltrated by the SDS?
Not while I was working on C Squad.
Did you ever see the SDS bagman bringing material over from the SDS back office to C Squad?
I probably did. I can't recall it now, but it's far from certain that I would have known what his role was with the SDS.
What is your recollection now of your awareness then of the SDS?
Very limited, very hard to say precisely. The only clarity I think that emerged was when I was approached to join the SDS. I have to say now, to try and distinguish between what I learnt perhaps months after my deployment on C Squad, it's very hard to distinguish that from what I knew 2 months previously. But that's my broad recollection.
What was C Squad's interest in the campaign for nuclear disarmament when you were working on C Squad?
When I was working on C Squad as a junior detective constable, I had no real grasp of the rationale for special branch monitoring CND.
Did you have not any knowledge that it was happening?
I'm sure I would have done, but I can't recall it now.
Did you know where the demand for that intelligence was coming from?
Not while I was on C Squad, probably not.
And later?
Later, yes.
And where was the demand coming from?
The demand was coming from Special Branch and from the security services.
Are you able to help us with whether or not it was also coming from any further up the chain, for example, the Home Office or the Cabinet Office?
I can't recall now, no.
What was C Squad's interest in Hackney and Stoke Newington as an area of interest?
I don't think that C Squad had a particular geographical interest, not that I can recall, but I do recall that certain areas of London would feature more regularly in public order situations than others.
What was C Squad's interest in campaigns against the police, people like Hackney Police Monitoring Group and so forth?
I don't think at that time I would have been able to formulate a clear answer in terms of the C Squad strategy.
Later?
Later, yes.
And what was the interest when you did become aware of it?
That it would be not based on the geography, but based on the groups that were being monitored by C Squad.
Sorry, could you explain the connection with police monitoring groups?
With the
Police monitoring groups, such as Hackney Police Monitoring Group.
the interest would be whether groups that were being monitored, whether they had a connection to that local campaign.
And what was the concern if they did?
I'm sorry?
What was the concern if the groups that were being monitored did have a connection with a local police monitoring group?
I don't think I could answer that without I don't think I could answer it as I was as a detective constable on C Squad.
Later?
Later, when I worked on the SDS, I would have gathered a clearer understanding.
What would that understanding have been?
That the groups that the SDS was infiltrating were of interest to special branch.
Let me test it this way. Was there a concern that racial justice groups were being influenced by far-left groups which were of interest to special branch?
That would be true, yes.
And what was the concern?
I'm not sure that I can immediately recall what that concern was, beyond the general concern of public order.
Was the concern that the far-left groups would stir up trouble which might either result in public order or the growth of subversive thoughts?
Certainly, yes, certainly the former and potentially the latter as well.
Why couldn't those groups be left to deal
It is ordered that there shall be no disclosure or publication made of the information stated during the hearing on 2nd of December 2024 from 1444 and 1446 until any further order is made. Should no further order be made which references this order, the terms of this order shall cease to have effect after today's date.
Nothing must be reported about what occurred in the hearing room between 2:44 and 2:46.
Mr. Lambert, you told Operation Hearn that you were given some advice about the age of the deceased child that you should look for. Someone who had died before the age of about 8 or 10. Why was that?
I think it was based on a lot of experience within the SDS. This particular officer explaining to me at the time, and I would have had a full understanding at the time of what the importance was. I'm pretty sure now that it revolved around the perceived difficulty of the officer's false identity, assumed identity being discovered if the death was, I think, did you say 6 to 8 years?
You told Hearn 8 to 10.
8 to 10 years. So that would be, I think that would be the reason.
Did you establish whether or not Mark Robinson's parents were still alive?
I didn't, to the best of my recollection.
Did somebody else do that on your behalf?
Not that I can recall.
You told Hearn that you wanted to have a general understanding of the area in which Mark Robinson lived. How did you get that understanding?
I can't recall precisely now. I think I had a reasonable knowledge of that area from my police experience. Did I go to that area? Not that I can recall.
Did Special Branch make any checks of any other kind on the family?
I don't think they did.
You said to Operation Hearn that whilst you were building your legend, management probably also came in to, offer advice and general thoughts about this business of creating the identity. Is that what they did?
Yes, it is.
And how regular was your contact with your managers on this subject?
To the best of my recollection, it was ongoing. How many times, I can't be sure.
Your immediate managers within the SDS, on your account, knew all about this technique. What is your knowledge of how far up the chain of command knowledge of the use of this technique went?
I can't say now with complete certainty, but the impression I'm left with that it certainly would have gone up to the senior officer on S Squad.
Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not knowledge extended to the Home Office?
I can't say for certain today, no.
Did you ever know the answer to that question?
I may have had a better idea had I been asked at the time, or even in the subsequent period when I was a manager.
Was there any direct contact between the SDS and the Home Office whilst you were serving as an undercover officer?
Not that I can recall.
Was there any direct contact between the SDS and the Home Office whilst you were managing within the unit?
Yes, there was contact,
Was it on that subject or not?
not that I can recall.
You told Channel 4 News that the practice was well known at the highest level of the Home Office. What was the basis for making that assertion to the national media?
I would have to say today that it was not soundly founded. It was a general recollection, but one that, on reflection and having looked or tried to look back as clearly as possible, I wouldn't wish to stand by it.
An exaggeration
Yes,
made to national media.
yes.
Did you have any choice as to whether or not to use a deceased child's identity?
I'm sorry, could you?
Did you have any choice as to whether or not to use a deceased child's identity?
No,
Did you give any thought to asking?
not that I can recall.
Was there any debate at all about alternative methods whilst you were legend building?
Not while I was legend building.
I want to move now to what you knew about the undercover officers who were deployed whilst you were in the back office. Can I take it that from your attendance at the safe house, you knew how many undercover officers were serving in the unit?
Yes,
And you knew which fields they were operating in?
yes.
And you knew their cover names?
That wouldn't have been quite so clear, but I certainly would have been aware of those names at the time.
And you knew at least something about the issues that they were facing in the course of their various deployments?
Yes.
To what extent, I don't want you to go into any details at the moment, but to what extent did you know about the issues? Did you get the impression that you were being told everything, most things, or just a curated selection?
Inevitably, or I would say of necessity, it was a sample. I can't say more definitely than that.
You were in the back office for a long time, weren't you?
Well, everyone was, but longer than average. 9 months, yeah.
Can I take it that you would therefore have had experience of officers dealing with a considerable variety of issues?
Yes,
Did you discuss with Mike Chitty before you deployed what you should expect deploying into the animal rights field?
yes, I would have had discussions with Mike Chitty.
And what did he tell you to prepare you to deploy into the animal rights field?
I can't recall today what he told me. I can't say what topics were covered with him.
Did he say anything about a woman who we are calling Lizzie?
I'm pretty sure that he didn't.
When you say you are pretty sure that he didn't, did he say anything at all about any sexual relationship with any woman?
Not while I was in that back office role, to the best of my recollection.
Did there come a time later on when he did?
Yes, there was a time later on.
When was that?
I can't put a date on it.
But can you, if you can't put a precise date on it, can you help us which year it was?
No, I can't.
Was it within your time as an undercover police officer, within the SDS, within your time as a manager, or in between the two?
I can't recall.
What did he tell you?
Well, I learnt from him that he had had a sexual relationship, and certainly by the time I was employed in a management role, that became an issue that I dealt with. So I had a very clear understanding of it then.
Is there anything about the circumstances in which he made that disclosure to you that helps you to locate it in time at all?
A first disclosure, no.
Was that sort of disclosure then not something that would stick in your mind?
I think not.
Did Mr. Chitty say anything about sexual relationships in general, or the risk of them, when you were talking to him?
When I was talking to him prior to my deployment or during my deployment, not
Shall we start with prior to?
prior to, not that I can recall. I think not.
During?
Not that I can recall.
Might he have done?
It's possible, but I honestly can't recall.
In terms of the issues that you came across other officers and the managers dealing with before you deployed, no names at the moment, please. Did you come across any who were having to appear in court?
Could you just help me again with the time?
Between joining the SDS in the autumn of 1983,
Yeah.
deploying in June 1984,
Yes.
the officer waiting to deploy, did you come across any instances of officers, undercover officers, having to appear in court?
I may have done, but I can't recall now.
Can you recall what the managerial attitude was to officers appearing in court in their undercover identities?
Yes, generally, what I learnt, whether it was back office or whether it was during deployment, but I learnt that it was to be avoided if at all possible, but that depending on the officer's target group, it would be a likelihood, and that if it did arise, that management would support the officer involved.
Did you come across any cases of officers participating in crime?
Not that I can recall.
What was the managerial attitude to that?
That could only be countenanced where it arose in circumstances that the officer had no control over.
Any crime at all?
I think it would be a case-by-case judgment. Public order situations would be one situation, the most common situation, I think, where an arrest would arise or crime might arise.
Fly posting, things like that, were they permitted?
I think it would have been a case-by-case judgment, would have been permitted but discouraged.
Was there any kind of threshold?
I'm sure there was. I can't think immediately of where that threshold sat.
Which side of that threshold would arson sit?
That would sit outside of it.
Sexual activity in undercover identities. Whilst you were in the back office, were there any specific instances of officers having an issue involving sexual activity in their undercover identity with a member of the public?
While I was in the back office?
Yes.
Not that I can recall.
In answering my question, are you sticking to what was said formally, or are you including off-the-record conversations?
Well, I'm certainly sticking to what I recall from learning from management.
I'd like to expand my question then, please. Were there any off-the-record conversations about specific officers being involved in such sexual activity whilst you were in the back office?
No, not that I can recall.
You describe being the bagman, and that task involved you moving documents between the SDS back office and the office where senior managers were accommodated. I'd like to ask you, when you were speaking to senior officers in the course of those duties, did any of them ever speak to you about the work of the SDS?
I honestly can't recall if they did.
Well, let's have a document up. It's the one at 722566, file 1A22. Page 17, please. Bottom of the page, this is one of your Hearn transcripts, Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
If I could let you have a look, please, at that bottom paragraph. And when you're ready, we'll go over the page.
Yes, ready.
Having refreshed your memory as to what you told Operation Hearn in 2013 about the sort of conversations you were having with chief superintendents, does that help jog your memory?
Yes, I think to some extent, yes. I would would accept that, and I can't really recall it today, but I'm happy to accept that.
The sort of views that they were expressing about where officers should be deployed. Do you recall any views being expressed about deployments into CND?
I don't know. I think I would have thought it would only be my deployment that would be the issue, but I don't have a clear recollection.
Can you recall at all what was said about your deployment then?
No, I can't.
Did they ever talk about sexual activity between undercover police officers and members of the public?
I'm pretty sure they didn't.
Why do you say that?
I think I would probably recall that.
And why would it be memorable?
I think to hear that from a senior officer would be likely to stick in my mind.
Why?
I can't add to that, I'm afraid.
Is it because that is not something you would expect them to acknowledge?
Yes, I would have thought, yes, I would think that would be the case, yeah.
Do you know whether any of the senior officers you spoke to either knew or suspected that there was sexual activity between SDS, undercover police officers, and members of the public?
At the time, I wouldn't have been able to answer that, and I can't today. I can't really say with any certainty.
Did you, in the course of your duties as bagman, talk to C Squad desk officers?
I would have spoken to them in the course of doing my job as bagman, yes.
Did they communicate to you in their intelligence requirements for the SDS to execute?
No, only I think perhaps in a administrative way, if a desk officer was making a specific request to a field officer or to the SDS, I might have been told to make sure that it was passed on, but nothing above or beyond my administrative role.
I want to move now to the subject of report writing. You were involved in the production of SDS intelligence reports in the back office, weren't you?
Yes.
And you also read the reporting of the officers who were deployed?
Yes.
Were reports that came in from undercover police officers always written up and filed?
Always? No, not always.
In what circumstances would they not be?
If the report was in some way superfluous, a duplicate, in other words, if more than one officer had reported on the same event, many different reasons, perhaps, but generally those reports would have been would have resulted in a published intelligence report.
Putting to one side reports that were going to be amalgamated as the product of multiple officers, how common was it for a report to be discarded?
Not routine. I can't recall any more than that.
When you deployed, how did you submit your intelligence?
In the way that I had learnt was the practice to submit either a handwritten or a typed report at a Monday or Thursday meeting. That was it, really.
Apart from what might be described as topping and tailing and inserting file references, would it be normal for there to be any change to the text of the intelligence submitted by an SDS officer when the report was written up?
I think it would be a case-by-case judgment. Certainly, there was no certainty from a field officer's point of view, no certainty that the report would remain as it had been submitted.
When you were writing up officers' reports, how often did you change their texts?
Are you now moving on to my management role?
No, in the back office.
Well, the back office role was purely clerical in the sense of adding file references, no more than that. The actual...
Were you aware as to whether your managers at the time were editing reports?
Well, indeed, that was the routine practice.
And when you were a detective inspector in the SDS, did you alter the text of the substance of what was being reported?
Well, it may have, not the substance, but I can't recall now an instance of editing, but...
And is the reason for that you would be in no position to alter the substance because it is the reporting officer who knows what happened?
I don't think that quite covers all the scenarios that might have been at play, but...
What other scenarios?
I can't call to mind at the moment, no.
Targeting. Your ultimate target, if I've understood it correctly, was the Animal Liberation Front.
Yes.
And if you'd been able to get to them, the Animal Rights Militia.
Yes.
How did your managers explain to you the importance of your target?
I think they referenced it to events at the time, the series of serious attacks carried out by the Animal Liberation Front and other animal rights extremist groups.
Did they give you any advice about the method or strategy that you should adopt?
Yes, I was advised to begin by joining local animal rights groups and, in addition, a group, London Greenpeace.
Did they explain why you should use that method?
With a view, they explained that this was potentially the best way to gain access to the Animal Liberation Front.
Did they explain to you what their requirements were? In other words, what you were expected to do, what they wanted from the deployment?
Yes, I think they wanted intelligence on the activities of the Animal Liberation Front, both preemptive intelligence and intelligence about individual members, about what was a network, I think, rather than a hierarchical organisation. I think they wanted an understanding of how exactly the Animal Liberation Front worked.
Am I right to understand from your answer that it was your remit was purely intelligence?
Yes.
And if I've understood your Hearn interviews correctly, you went about preparing to deploy by researching animal rights activists who were known to Special Branch by looking at their files.
Yes.
Was there discussion with your managers of the challenges that you might face infiltrating animal rights groups with a view to discovering more about the ALF?
Yes, I think there was a recognition of a potential risk to my safety, my family's safety, and equally a potential risk to the operational security of the SDS if my true identity became known to them, to that target group.
How important was the operational security of the SDS to your managers?
It was of prime importance. And
sorry, carry on.
well, purely, also, I think it's two issues coming together here. I think that operational security and an individual field officer's safety and the safety of their family were interdependent. If an individual field officer's identity became known to a target group, then there was understood at the time to be a potential knock-on to the safety of other officers.
What risks to your safety were expressed to you?
I beg your pardon, sorry?
What risks to your safety were expressed to you?
What views?
What risks?
Risks. A risk of serious harm, injury, because the groups that were prepared to carry out incendiary device attacks at the homes of scientists such as Dr. Brian Meldrum, Professor Colin Blakemore, that the same risks would apply to a field officer who was identified.
Are you talking here about the ALF or the ARM?
I'm talking about both groups. I think one of the things that I did discover was that there was not the clear distinction in membership between the ALF and the animal rights militia as was intended. I can say more on that, but I won't unless you want me to.
Without uttering the name, was anyone that you mixed with during your deployment, to your definite knowledge, involved in actions claimed under both banners?
I would have been able to answer that at least I would have been able to answer that with a degree of knowledge at the time, but today I can't, no.
Accommodation, squatting. Were invitations to squat amongst the challenges that were discussed between you and your managers before you deployed?
If not before, certainly during my deployment.
And what was their view?
That it was not really, it wasn't viable. It was to be avoided.
Why?
I think because it would entail it would increase the risk of not being able to maintain what was recommended. It was recommended that a field officer should always be able to readily return to home life and to be living in a squad. Of course, there were no doubt, you can't say that every squad was the same, but certainly there would have been a risk of different kinds in different squads.
Was a risk of sexual activity between an undercover police officer and a member of the public ever expressed to be one of those risks?
Not that I can recall.
But if one mixes very closely with people in a squat, there would be an increased chance of sexual activity, wouldn't there?
Well, it's potential, I can see that, but again, it would have to be a case-by-case judgment, I'm sure.
But if I'm understanding your evidence correctly, it was not a matter that bothered your managers.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. No, I'm not. I don't think I said that.
Well, if that wasn't one of the risks that was discussed. presumably we can infer that it wasn't a risk that they were concerned about.
I don't think so, at least not from what I can recall. I mean, given that I didn't live my cover role, my 4.5 years in the field, I didn't live in a squat. I certainly visited many squats, so that's.
I think you're drifting a little bit away from the question. My question is directed at what your managers said to you and
yes,
their attitude.
And on that, I just can't recall.
You've described, again to Operation Hearn, that there was a difference in your deployment compared to those of your predecessors because you were deploying with the ALF as a target. You've said that one's standing within the group would be based on what you did and not what you knew. Is that right?
Well, yes, I think I can understand that. Yeah.
And what did you mean by that?
Well, in summary, I meant that in another type of target group, the important consideration would be a grasp of the organisation's political creed. I think in the animal rights movement generally, and the Animal Liberation Front in particular, I think it was much more about what you did for the cause, and that what you did or what you might do would cover a lot of things, from going on demonstrations through to through to all of the actions that are out there on the streets, as opposed to being perhaps more theoretical.
In other words, you needed to be a doer.
Yes.
And if your ultimate destination was the ALF, you needed to do enough to be invited in.
Yes.
Did that thinking occur to you and your managers before you deployed?
Well, I'm sure it did. Yes, I'm sure it would have done.
What advice were you given?
I think certainly to be reassured. This is to say, managers would have wanted me, when I was deployed, they wanted me to be reassured that I would have their support when I was out there doing, and that, that was the case.
Did they discuss with you specifically what you could and could not do?
Not that I can recall now, no. But
how did you propose to deal with that challenge?
Well, I dealt with it in a number of ways, which I've covered in my statement. There's many strands to it, but I don't know whether you want me to.
Well, I would like your recollection now, please,
Yes.
about what you were planning to do in order to demonstrate that you were a doer.
Well, I can't give you an answer to that. What I was planning, either, prior to deployment or at deployment, I can't really say now.
Is that because you were going to see how it went?
Well, yes, there would be certainly be an element of that, yes.
Can we now look at an article that was published by Spinwatch? It's volume 3, sir, tab B, Roman numeral 1, 34, 37, 416 for the projector. This is an article dated the 24th of October 2011. My understanding of it is Spinwatch is publishing your reply to something they've previously published. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we look at the second paragraph on the first page, please, you say, as I explain in The Guardian, in the 1980s, I was deployed as an undercover Met Special Branch officer to identify and prosecute members of the Animal Liberation Front who were then engaged in incendiary device and explosive device campaigns against targets in the vivisection, meat, and fur trades. Now, the words I'm particularly interested in are to identify and prosecute. You have told us today that your deployment was evidential only.
No, intelligence only.
Sorry,
Yes.
you correct me. Intelligence only.
Yes, yes. Well,
If you were going to prosecute someone, you would conduct an evidential deployment, wouldn't you?
yes.
Is it right, first of all, then, that this statement is inaccurate?
Yes.
Was there any discussion with your managers at the time as to whether or not your deployment should be evidential?
No.
Did that thought cross your mind?
No.
Was it hoped that ALF activists would be convicted of crimes as a result of your intelligence?
I can't say now. I honestly, there's certainly a strong likelihood that at my deployment that wasn't anticipated.
It wasn't anticipated.
Well, certainly it was never anticipated that my role would go beyond an intelligence gathering role. That is 100% clear. But that there was, I don't think I was put under any particular pressure, or I don't recall an expectation that prosecutions were expected to arise. I think it was very much SDS intelligence gathering, but recognising that this was a different context.
I may come back to this question in a few days' time, but I'd like your view now, please. Would it have been better if, in fact, your deployment had been conducted as a long-term evidential deployment?
Well, I can see now that there may well have been some benefits in that, but I couldn't offer a quick answer today. Really, there'd be a lot of pros and cons. There'd be a lot of pros and cons involved, I think. But
What would those pros and cons be?
Well, one con would be that to the best of my knowledge, the SDS operation was the best operation for, if not the only police operation for gaining the kind of intelligence that myself and other SDS officers were involved in. So that would be one reason for thinking that an entirely different unit might, that was following an evidential route, might have problems. I mean, there is a lot more I could say about this, because when I was in a management role, these issues were discussed.
Well, it is an obvious pro that in the event of a prosecution, the involvement of a UCO would be disclosed, and if there were any factual disputes about the role of the UCO, they could be dealt with at trial.
Indeed, yes, I understand that now.
And a con would be that if the SDS did it, then that would bring to an end, or threaten to bring an end to the SDS operation.
Yes.
And the SDS operation was regarded as extremely valuable, wasn't it?
Yes.
Can I move now to pre-deployment advice on drugs? What advice were you given, if any, about controlled substances and using them whilst deployed?
Yeah, my general recollection is that drugs were to be avoided, but if social situations arose with drug taking, to perhaps to come up with a reason for not indulging, or just pretending to be involved.
Were you told in terms not to do it?
Not that I recall, no.
Were you warned that it was prevalent in the groups that you were going to infiltrate?
I don't know, not that I can recall.
Who gave you the advice? No names, please.
Who gave me the advice?
The advice to try and avoid it, but if in a social situation...
I can't recall now, I'm sorry.
Did you take controlled substances as an undercover police officer?
No, I didn't.
Did you feign smoking cannabis?
Yes, I think I probably did.
How often?
I can't recall.
And to what extent did you feign it?
I can't recall.
Can you give us some indication, please, if you can't remember precisely, approximately, was it frequently, very frequently, not very often? Can you please give us an indication?
Not very often.
In what sort of circumstances?
In a social setting.
So would now be a convenient time to take the afternoon break?
Certainly. And we have a 15-minute break to enable the transcribers to rest, and you, for that matter. Could I ask, please, those at the back of the hearing... Quiet, please. Could I ask you at the back of the hearing room not to make noises when evidence is being given? It is very important that the witness can give evidence in peace and quiet, and that I can hear it in peace and quiet. To disturb it makes my life and the witness's life more difficult. Thank you.
All rise.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lambert, we're now going to have a look at the advice you were given about sexual relationships
Yes.
before you deployed. I'd like to start with what you told Operation Hearn about a trip to Boulogne. And in particular, you said that you'd had a conversation on this subject with a person you described as a senior field officer. First of all, I'm going to remind you of what you said to Operation Hearn. If we could have, please, 726-601, Volume 1, Tab A, Roman numerals 2, Tab 3, at page 14. And it's the bottom paragraph on the page that I'm interested in. You'll see a reference to Boulogne, the trip to Boulogne, about halfway down the paragraph, but the material part is near the bottom. It was like, well, Bob, you know, you are going to find women that you know want to have a relationship. And you know, are going to have to manage that. Never, I think, you know, there was never any suggestion that you, Bob, are going to chase women or you, Bob, are going to target women. I don't think that was ever suggested or was, but, and, well, I think it was like. Now, first of all, could you write down, please, the nominal for the senior field officer that we are talking about?
I don't believe I can. I've thought about this. I can't be certain about the identity of that field officer.
You told Hearn that you didn't want to tell them. You didn't tell them that you couldn't remember who it was.
Well, perhaps both things are true.
Did it not strike you as an important piece of advice?
It did, yes.
Striking piece of advice. And you're telling us you can't remember who gave it to you.
I am saying that, for sure. I am saying that.
Is there a reticence on your part about getting a colleague into trouble?
I'm sure I have experienced reticence, but equally, I'm faced with recalling something where I need to be absolutely certain. I think elsewhere in interviews, I describe a bit more context, other perhaps 2 or 3 other officers, and to be sure now, we're actually now well, over 40 years ago, to be sure about who said what on a...
Would you be able to narrow it down to a small number of possible people?
Well, yes, that's true. I could narrow it down to some extent. Yes.
To how many?
Perhaps 2 or 3.
Could you write down those 2 or 3 nominals, please?
Because you're writing it down, you can use their names if you prefer, but we can convert it into nominals later if need be. do whichever you prefer.
Is it the case that you are not sure which of these two is the officer who specifically gave you advice on the Boulogne trip?
Not quite. My recollection is of 3 or 4 people in a group setting. But I'm confident that it included these 2 officers.
And can you help us with approximately when this trip occurred?
Well, some point during my, during my back office. So between September 83 and June 84, probably closer to June 84.
And what advice do you recall being given?
I can't recall anything beyond what I've alluded to in the interview. I think there is a subsequent interview where I talk about it.
In summary, it's going to happen. Keep it casual.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think at that stage, be aware and potentially avoid it.
I'm reading those words from one of your answers to Operation Hearn in 2013, but the advice was, well, it's going to happen, but keep it casual, and if you don't, you will find you're going to find it difficult to manage, more difficult to manage.
Right, well, I accept that. Equally, I suppose I would want to say that that's coming from one officer. There might well have been other officers who would say, be aware and avoid that happening. And certainly my overall recollection and impression is that a significant number of field officers did avoid having any sexual relations.
I can tell you that I can utter both of the nominals you've written down, HN 82 and HN 67. If I'm understanding your evidence, you're saying you recall a small gathering, perhaps 4 people discussing this topic on the trip to Beloit.
Yes, at some stage on a trip, 4 people probably discussing a range of subjects, but this is my best recollection of one part of it that bears upon this issue.
And HN 82 and HN 67 are both party to this conversation.
Yes.
Can you remember the 4th person?
Well, I think possibly.
Don't utter a name, but...
No, I can't be sure, and I think that it's possibly 4 plus me. I'm not sure.
And were you given the impression that women would make advances towards you?
I think, well, yes, I think that was part of it. I think, yes, I think to be aware, yeah.
And in what sort of tone and mood were you being told that you could expect sexual attention from female activists?
I think quite serious, quite, I think, based on experience. I think it was part of field officers preparing a recruit or new recruit to things to be aware of.
And what experiences did HN 67 recount to you?
None at that time, none in that meeting or in that on that trip. None that I can recall.
Did HN 67 at any time disclose to you any sexual activity with a member of the public while he was in his undercover identity?
Not until very much later.
When?
I can't recall now.
Whilst you were still an undercover police officer?
I can't be sure.
Was it before you were a manager in the SDS?
Again, I just can't be sure.
What is your recollection of where and when you were when he did make a disclosure to you?
I just don't have that recollection.
What did he disclose to you?
You just make sure I'm remembering the numbers correctly.
Yes, of course.
This is 67, isn't it? No, I can't. I can't recall precisely what he said.
What do you recall? Because we started this line of questioning when you told me he had said something to you.
Yes, yes.
So what did he say?
Just leaving whatever he said to me left me with an understanding that he had had a sexual relationship.
What sort of sexual relationship?
To the best of my recollection, a brief one.
Days, months, years?
A brief one. I can't.
Did he ever say anything to you to the effect that he had got a woman pregnant?
He never did. He never did. And this extends through to my time as a manager when I took, took over his job. And when I found out that he had fathered a child quite relatively recently, I was surprised.
How did you find out that he had fathered a child?
Very recently, during the course of the inquiry's work.
Again, being careful with names, who told you?
I don't think anyone. I'm not sure. I don't think anyone told me. I think through the work of the inquiry.
Did HN82 tell you of any experiences that he had had which led to his advice?
Not that I can recall. I certainly never had any clear impression that he had had a sexual relationship.
What was your reply to being given this advice?
I don't think I was expected to reply. I was expected to listen.
Did you reply?
I've no idea.
What were your thoughts?
Again, it's very hard to say now. Certainly, by the time I was deployed, I had a lot of advice about maintaining cover, as the phrase was then. I don't think I can recall now exactly what the impact was on me.
Can you recall whether or not it was something that struck you as particularly striking, or was it in keeping with what you might have been told before or the general atmosphere?
It was certainly a development during the course of 9 months, getting to know individual field officers to a degree. And so there was definitely, for me, that my understanding of what the job might entail certainly developed. But it was very, very varied because different field officers had different experiences and different types of target group.
I read part of one of your answers from your Hearn transcript a moment ago. I'm going to read just 2 paragraphs down, your answer to the next question. Well, I mean, I can think of, and this is about managers, I can think of 2 or 3, that I spoke to, I beg your pardon, it's about senior officers, 2 or 3 that that I spoke to in that context. And the guy in Boulogne, I can remember, but there are reasons that I'd rather not say at the moment, but I don't. If it becomes important, then I may well reconsider. But just as of now, I just wouldn't feel comfortable. There are 2 parts of that answer I want to ask. First of all, you're talking about 2 or 3 senior field officers giving you advice. Naming no names, writing down if you need to. Who were those 2 or 3?
Well, they're the same 2 or 3 that I've already referred to.
And you did say to Hearn that if it becomes important, that I may well reconsider.
Yes.
Did you not consider this issue to be important enough to remember or to write down?
I think the first thing to say is that my 2013 interview was the first time I was being asked in an interview to recall to recall everything that I could. It was my best attempt at the time, 2013. Much of my field experience had been locked away at somewhere deep in my memory for many, many years, and this was my first attempt at trying to recall. And yes, there was a reluctance there to identify people, but partly, if not primarily, because I think I needed to be certain. I needed, yes, as you say, very important matters, and I just needed to be certain. I think at many points in these 2013 interviews, as you can see, I'm doing my best. I'm not fully aware of the extent to which, my memory may have been impaired. But that, I think, and maybe at other points too, if I can't be absolutely certain, then I think that would explain the reluctance.
That wasn't the reason you gave at the time, was it?
No, but it certainly was subsequently, and it is very much the case today.
Can we move on now to your managers and their awareness of sexual relations occurring in the field? What is your recollection now of your managers' awareness?
Yes, I have a recollection of a degree of management awareness of certainly the risks of sexual relationships arising for field officers. I can't recall any instances where I heard or where I learnt that managers were actually aware of an individual case, but I did develop an impression of a degree of acceptance that, you know, that it was certainly that it was likely to arise.
What did DCI Waite say to you that gave you that understanding?
I don't think anything that DCI Waite said to me directly gave me that understanding.
Did DI Barber say anything to you that gave you that understanding?
Only on the specific occasion that I deal with in my statement.
Are you talking about your own sexual activity here?
Yes.
Did he tell you anything before you deployed which gave you the impression that he was aware of a risk of sexual relationships?
So, well, of a risk, I can't yet. My impression is, yes, that there was a management awareness of that risk, and but I can't recall any direct statements from either of them.
Detective Sergeant Couch?
The same.
HN 45?
Well, the same.
Are you trying to protect these managers?
No.
Are you trying to impute them with knowledge when there is not, in fact, very much basis for doing so?
No.
What then was the basis that you have described for believing they were aware of the risk of sexual relationships?
Well, I can't recall today any specific occasion or context in which I gained that impression.
You describe to Hearn a lunchtime jog with a manager. Does that jog your memory?
I'm sorry?
You described a lunchtime jog. I'll read the relevant passage. In fact, we can have it up. It's 0722 593, page 4. That's volume 1, tab A, Roman numeral 2, 4. The bottom large paragraph, you can read. Yeah. Well, I think it was clear that it was sort of a piece with a sort of a broad concern around the table. So, you know, 4 experienced managers around the table, and then perhaps in the month before I'm deployed, right? Well, We now know where Bob's going to be going, this is, and it was at the time, this is quite, different, demanding in its own ways. And there was quite a few unknowns. But I think on the issue of relationships, I think there was a sort of broad understanding. And often, comments might be made to me, I might be going out for a lunchtime jog with a member of the management team. And so, I was in I was in no doubt that the issue of relationships was kind of a real one that lay ahead of me that I didn't. No one was saying to me, well, we're really worried about this. So what was said about the risk of sexual relationships or the subject of sexual relationships whilst jogging with management?
Well, this does jog my memory, but I can't add to it. It's very much about the issue, but I can't add to it.
Were you ever told not to get involved in sexual activity with members of the public in your undercover identity?
I was never told that as a direction, never, no.
And it's right, isn't it, that there was nothing built in to your undercover legend to deter sexual relationships or sexual activity?
No.
Was that a subject that was ever discussed?
Not that I can recall.
Why didn't you do that?
Again, I can't recall.
You'd been told there was a risk, hadn't you?
Yes.
You were married.
Yes.
Why didn't you build something into your legend to enable you to deter sexual activity, to give you an excuse not to do it and to remain faithful to your wife?
I can't recall now why. I can't recall why I didn't, no.
Was it because you were contemplating getting involved in sexual activity?
No, I can be certain that that wasn't the case.
Did anybody speak to you about using contraception if you were going to have sex undercover?
I don't believe so, no.
Why do you think that topic never came up?
I can't say.
I'm understanding your evidence that there's a general acceptance that sexual activity is going on. That is, contraception in those circumstances is an important topic, isn't it?
It would be, yes.
And yet nobody was saying anything.
Well, only to the best of my recollection.
Did it occur to you before you deployed?
I'm sure that it might have done. I can't say. I can't recall.
Did you speak to anybody about the subject before you deployed?
Not that I can recall.
I'd like to take you to a specific part of the transcripts from the Hearn interviews. It's 726601, Volume 1, Tab A, Roman numeral 2, Subdivider 3. Once we've got there, to page 16, please. Towards the bottom, the question is, did you ever talk to another UCO about it? Near the bottom, it reads that I wasn't sort of experienced in the way that some colleagues were at the time, and maybe you know, and maybe that was a little bit to my detriment, because when, well, I won't move on to that. I'll stay in the back office for now. But it may well be, you know, if we could go over. Be, you know, and I mean, what an astute management. But I think, you know, they were mindful of the sort of issues that I would face. I mean, each officer is different, each targeting is different, but anyway, I soaked up everything up, and the advice that I got back in Boulogne, it stayed with me. Now, I'm interested in the phrase that you used, that you were, it might have been a little bit to your detriment, that you weren't as experienced as your colleagues. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I'm saying, what else? What was the significance of it?
Well, I'm asking you what you meant by saying that it was a little bit to your detriment, and I'm understanding to be your sexual inexperience.
Yes. I think in the context of advising me along the lines we've seen, you know, Bob, you need to be aware.
Why was it in your mind, why was it detrimental to be as inexperienced as you were with members of the opposite sex?
I don't think I'm saying that was in my mind, but it might have been that, you know, that might have been perception. Either way, I guess it makes sense that that I would, you know, need to be aware of the sort of the scenarios or the scenario that was described to me in Boulogne.
A sexual advance.
Yes.
And if I've misunderstood, and if it was your managers who thought that your previous lack of sexual experience was detrimental, why did they think that?
No, I'm sorry, I can't assist.
And what were your thoughts as you deploy about what lay ahead for you sexually?
I genuinely believe I didn't give it much thought. I was concentrating on the task of forming close friendships and perhaps without realising the extent to which, or the situation that would develop from that.
Sorry, you finish your answer.
Well, a sexual relationship arising from and in the context of the kind of close friendship that I was expected to cultivate.
Is it your evidence then that you gave no thought to what you would do if a sexual advance was made towards you?
Not no thought, but not an overriding thought, perhaps not a major thought.
What thought had you given to it?
I can't recall now.
What thought had you given to the question of whether or not you would act upon any attraction that you had to somebody you met undercover and had sexual feelings for?
I can't really say, I can't be sure what prior thought I'd given to it.
Notwithstanding the conversations that you'd had in the back office?
Yes.
Did you have any guidance on or understanding of the lawful basis for your work as an undercover police officer?
Well, yes, I certainly had an understanding of that at the time, yes.
And what was your understanding?
Well, my understanding now is...
what was your understanding then, please?
My understanding now of what my understanding was then is it's not immediately, it's not at the forefront of my mind now, but...
Was it then? Did you give any thought to the legal basis of what you were doing?
I believe that I did, yes.
What legal limitations did you understand there to be?
Well, I believed that all of the guidance to police officers generally, they all applied.
So the code of discipline applied?
Yes.
And the law of the land?
Yes.
Without any caveats?
I think there would have been some caveats.
What caveats arise from the fact that you are operating as an undercover police officer?
I can't call them to mind at the moment.
Can we go to 722593, please? That's Volume 1, Tab A, Roman numeral 2, Subdivider 4. And could we have page 8, please? If we pick this up in the long paragraph, about half a dozen lines from the bottom, I did make mistakes, and I think that in terms of relationships with women, I think, actually some of those concerns, I think I sort of probably struggled with that. But to be honest, well, I think, I think I did the best I could in each situation. But I can't say that. I can't say I wasn't sufficiently prepared. I think that time in, that 9 months in the back office, although it may have lacked some structure and it may have lacked a bit of formality, but actually in terms of learning, I think it was first rate. Is that an opinion that you still hold in 2024?
With the benefit of hindsight, no, but I think I'm covering quite a bit of ground in this extract.
How could you say to Operation Hearn in 2013, when you had not been told not to have sexual relationships and had been told to keep it casual, that your training was first rate?
I think in fairness, when I say that the back office training was first rate, I'm intending not to be focusing on the issue of sexual relationships alone, but be that as it may, I can't recall now any more of the context to explain it.
Well, you didn't give any qualification to your assessment, did you?
No.
Was that because you overlooked the question of sexual relationships in making your assessment of the training?
I don't think so.
Was it because you thought that the sexual relationships were not a very serious matter?
No, I don't think in 2013 that certainly wasn't my understanding.
Did you think then that the ends justified the means?
No.
So why did you say that your training was first rate despite what you had been told about sexual relationships and without being told that they were prohibited?
I can't add any more to it at this stage. I can't recall.
Can I move now to the discussions that you had with the then Mrs. Lambert before you deployed? You told Operation Hearn that you spoke a lot to your wife during your training about what you were doing. Is that right? I mean, I can show you the quote if you would like it precisely, but from your recollection, is it right that you were telling your wife what you were doing?
No, is this during my training?
Yes.
Not beyond talking, day-to-day issues that.
I mean, just to help you, I'm not suggesting you broke the Official Secrets Act or anything like that.
No.
She knows you're you're going to be an undercover officer. She knows you're preparing for it.
Yes.
Your man and wife.
Yes.
You're talking about it.
Talking about it, but very much in general terms. Not, it wasn't a case of Official Secrets Act, more just operational security, not to be mentioning target groups or individuals and so forth.
Well, let's turn up exactly what you did say. It's 722-593, page 10. So, about the third paragraph down, you've been asked about talking to your wife, and you say, I did speak a lot to my wife, especially when I was training, and I'm trying to think, she did meet some of the other officers and some of their wives. Yeah. And there was quite a developed kind of community there. And so, my wife got to meet other wives of other field officers, and I think we had some very good friends who had known us from pre-police days. So all in all, we had a good support network, but I would say that I probably was rather circumspect in what I told and especially on the issues of around relationships. I mean, I'm now just talking about during that training period. Do you stand by that evidence?
Yes.
Why didn't you talk to Mrs. Lambert about the risk of sexual relationships?
Well, in the pre-deployment period, and I think she would have met some other officers there, but in that period, I would have hoped that I would not become involved in sexual relationships in my undercover role.
You were hoping not to?
Yes.
Why is that? Are you saying that is why you did not speak to her about it?
Not the whole reason, no.
What other factors were bearing upon your decision not to speak to her about the risk of sexual relationships?
A whole context of issues which would have related to my my marriage, not wanting to address an issue that was at that time wholly alien to my marriage, my family life. I was fortunate to be in a very loving relationship, and I wouldn't have been able to contemplate any discussion which would, to some degree, go against everything I'd experienced in my married life up until that point.
Precisely what was alien to your married life?
sexual relationships outside of marriage, for one, and a wholly loving relationship with complete honesty.
Was it because, to use the words of your advisor, it is going to happen?
No, I can honestly say that was not the case before I was deployed.
Would not speaking openly to Mrs. Lambert about what might lay ahead for you, sexual temptation, potentially, as you had been told, sexual advances, would not discussing that have in itself acted as a restraining factor?
It's impossible really for me to say now whether that might have been a restraining factor.
Or would it not have been all the more difficult to cross the Rubicon if you knew your wife was aware of the risks and you had discussed them with her?
Well, that certainly sounds persuasive, but I have no recollection of having those thoughts at the time.
It would also have been fair to her, wouldn't it?
It would.
But can we take it from your decision not to speak to her that fairness to her was not a factor that crossed your mind?
It certainly, I'm sure it would have done. I'm sure it would have done.
So why didn't you act on it?
Because at that stage, I had a belief that I would avoid sexual relationships.
Can we take it that nobody else warned her that there was a risk of sexual relationships in the field?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Did you talk to any of the other field officers, ex-field officers, or your managers about whether, and if so, how, you should broach this subject with your spouse?
No, not to my recollection.
Was the position of Mrs. Lambert, being kept in ignorance of the risks, to your knowledge, the common position for wives of SDS undercover police officers?
Very difficult to try and assess that. I wouldn't have been able to at the time. Now it may well have some application. I can't be sure.
Moving away from the subject of sexual relationships, can you recall now whether or not your managers did actually speak to your wife?
No, there was no visit to my home address, which did become a practice later on. At that time, there was no visit. However, I do recall a meeting at a Christmas gathering, which would have been the Christmas of '83, a Christmas gathering where I was able to introduce her to managers and some of the field officers.
Were there any communications between managers and Mrs. Lambert about what she could expect as the wife of an undercover police officer other than at a social event?
Not that I can recall, no.
So would now be a convenient moment to break.
Yes, it would. I'm afraid you're in for a long week. Can you be back ready to start again at 10 tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
Can I thank those at the back of the room for keeping perfectly still and quiet, and hope that that will remain so for the rest of the week. Thank you.
All right.